Hello friends, tragic news. We're going over the grim statistics of deaths on Poland's bodies of water, the tragedy on the Baltic, the horrific story involving a child in Bochki, and other such sad topics,
like the murder of two girls 26 years later.
In short, we have 5 stories where alcohol, negligence, violence, and fatal decisions lead to tragedies. Nevertheless, even though the news is sad, please like and subscribe to the channel. Huge thanks to everyone who takes 2 seconds like to support aerodynamics, to support the working class.
Thank you for these simple actions. Now, let's get down to business.
Fresh and, let's be honest, grim statistics have just arrived from the Polish Government Security Center. Since April 1st of this year, 184 people have already died on the country's bodies of water, including 17 children. Just in the past 24 hours, another tragedy occurred. But let's go step by step. Let's break down these dry numbers carefully. If you look at, let's say, the profile of a drowning victim, the picture that emerges is classic and sad. The overwhelming majority of victims are men. 160 men and 18 women. Among them, 156 are adults. And of course, it's very sad that 17 children have died. At the same time, the myth that everyone drowns only during storms at sea is debunked by the harsh statistics. Only 8 people died at sea. Most of the deaths happened in inland bodies of water, meaning lakes, ponds, and quarries. 126 people died there, 35 in rivers, and then some, ditches or ravines, 12 there. Most of them were in the Masurian Lake District, as well as in the Pomeranian and West Pomeranian voivodeships. Well, friends, there is a small positive point regarding the trend. In 2025, by this date, there were 170 fatalities, and in 2024, there were 251. The numbers are now lower than last year's peaks, but of course, that doesn't make it any easier for anyone. The reason for most of these tragedies remains the same year after year. It's the usual overestimation of one's own abilities, alcohol, and neglect of basic safety. Water, in case anyone doesn't know, doesn't forgive foolishness or showing off. So, dear friends, use your heads, keep an eye on the kids, and remember that swimming is not a reason to test your luck.
It seemed like we could put an end to this story, right? But now there's some fresh news.
Darlovka, that's on the Baltic Sea, brought some tragic news. This is the coast of the sunny Baltic, excuse the tautology. On Monday evening, a 53-year-old man and his 46-year-old companion went swimming in the stormy sea. This was after the official beach had closed and the lifeguard's shift was over.
The result is sad. Both of them were caught by a treacherous rip current. In Polish, if I'm not mistaken, it's called a prąd, steczny. The woman miraculously managed to hold on to some kind of hydraulic structure. But, strangely enough, the man, he was a ksiądz, a priest, despite all efforts, died.
So there was an immediate uproar around the incident because the prosecutor's office and the media started investigating whether the red flag warning was up at the time of the swim. The rescuers explained that there was a storm during the day, and yes, the ban was indeed in effect on dozens of beaches in the region. But since it was already after the rescuers' working hours, the flags might have been taken down. Although, what difference does it really make whether a piece of red cloth was hanging there if there are, damn it, 2 meter, well, okay, not 2 meter, but 1.5 meter waves raging in the sea? As witnesses note, the friends who were with the group tried to talk them out of it, saying, "What are you doing going in there?" fully understanding all the danger. But for some reason, people stubbornly believe that the laws of physics and the treachery of water currents don't apply to them. The elements made no exceptions for age, profession, or social status. Well, I don't know, damn, what are people thinking? The Baltic Sea isn't a quiet little river puddle. It's a harsh body of water. And once again, neglecting basic safety rules and common sense has led to an irreparable tragedy. Why couldn't they just use their heads, cool down for a minute, think, and not test fate? It's a complete mystery to me. But friends, if in the case of the Baltic we are dealing with a dangerous force of nature and human overconfidence, the next story is of a completely different kind. Because sometimes the problem isn't that a person underestimated the danger once, but that after a terrible tragedy, they didn't learn any lessons at all. Let's move to the Polish village of Bochki. And there, a truly wild, surreal drama unfolded, one that makes the hair stand on end not only for lawyers, but even for me and for any reasonable person. A 47-year-old local resident managed in that very same place on his own property. in almost the exact same way, to repeat the nightmare from 3 years ago. The man was reversing his car with a light trailer and ran over his 4-year-old son. Can you imagine? Fortunately, this time there was no fatal outcome. The boy has a lung contusion, but the doctors hope that after a week in the hospital he'll recover and everything will be fine. But what's the point? Okay, let's not say point. Let's say the essence. What's the essence of this story? It's in the gruesome details. Exactly 3 years ago, this very same man in the very same vehicle was reversing in exactly the same way and, well, ran over his 10-month-old baby who died. Yes, back then the tragedy was accompanied by attempts to cover up the evidence. The relatives tried to convince the police that it was some unknown reckless driver who drove onto their property and fled. The court of first instance, well, obviously it was all very suspicious, but when it went to court, the court of first instance sentenced this father to prison. But the Court of Appeal showed remarkable leniency, replacing prison with a fine. Guess how much? Only 2,000 zlotys. And I just have a question. How would you describe what's happening? What is this pure, blatant negligence multiplied by complete disregard for safety in your own yard? When a person under identical circumstances, well, injures and kills, let's be direct, his own children twice. This isn't just some string of bad luck. This is some kind of systemic failure on the father's part. Now, the good-for-nothing father faces up to 5 years in prison. And the public is rightfully asking, what do overly lenient court sentences ultimately teach? Write in the comments what you think. And while in boxing shoes we already have to talk about the consequences of a tragedy that has already happened, in the next story, investigators actually went back. Spoiler alert, we're going back 26 years. Because some cases, no matter how far back they go, never completely disappear. As you've probably already guessed, right? There was a murder of 2 girls, and now, 26 years later, the case is still not over. The indictment in the case of the murder of 2 teenage girls has been officially sent to court, so 26 years have passed. Despite the fact that the bodies of the victims have still not been found. The investigator from the Warsaw Police Headquarters Criminal Terror and Homicide Unit, together with the prosecutor's office, managed to reconstruct the picture of the tragedy and complete the investigation. Friends, I read the Polish press. Personally, I don't really add anything. Well, I add my own thoughts, but I don't make up facts. I just have a slightly different way of presenting things, a bit different from Polish newspapers, but when it comes to facts, I don't make anything up.
Tragic events took place in August 2000 in the city of Radzymin.
High school students Anna and Marta were hanging out with friends at a local festival. The girls were supposed to meet their parents at 11 p.m. to go home together, but they didn't show up at the meeting place. The search yielded no results, and after some time, the suspected murder case was suspended due to lack of evidence. 2 years ago, law enforcement made a breakthrough by thoroughly reconstructing the chain of events from that evening. This made it possible to identify the group of people who were near the girls before they disappeared. At that time, 3 men were charged with murder and were taken into custody for 3 months. As a result of the investigation, 2 of them, Tomasz and Krzysztof, will stand trial. They have been charged with murder, accompanied by a very bad act. You understand what kind of act I mean, right? Something sexual, something bad. I won't say those words because, damn, YouTube will demonetize me again, and what am I supposed to do about that? Anyway, it was done with particular cruelty. Tomasz is involved in the case as a repeat offender. He has previously served time for robbery and the same kind of group bad act. I don't know what's up with Krzysztof, but besides murder and the bad act, he's also charged with possession of a large quantity of drugs. So guys, clearly they're running things with a heavy hand. As for the third one, it's kind of unclear. There isn't enough evidence. Both defendants are facing life sentences. And honestly, that's the news, my friends. But I have a question. Why did it take 26 years to establish the circumstances? The answer probably doesn't lie in just one simple reason. Yes, it's kind of unclear how the witnesses could forget the details, and then remember them later. But the fact remains, an investigation that seemed to be at a dead end for a decade suddenly comes back to life. And it's kind of unclear, because if they didn't even find the bodies, how did they determine that something bad was done to the girls? Write your guesses in the comments. And next we have a story that didn't start as a tragedy, not as a crime, but as an ordinary celebration. Wedding, guests, a banquet hall, alcohol, in other words. The classic set of circumstances where people sometimes really lack one simple skill, knowing when to stop. Wadowice. Wadowice is in the Lesser Poland voivodeship, not far from Krakow, the birthplace of John Paul II. And there, a celebration at a hotel ended in a wild tragedy and a criminal case. The Krakow District Prosecutor's Office charged 6 guests, among whom, by the way, was an active police officer. All of this happened on Saturday evening. A 38-year-old man from the Mazovian voivodeship, who had come there from Warsaw and was younger than me, was staying at the hotel. And he wasn't really invited, but he came to the banquet hall anyway. He started provoking people and causing trouble. They asked him to leave. All of this almost immediately turned into a brutal fight. 6 men are accused of a violent beating. According to the investigation, they kicked the victim repeatedly while striking his head and body over and over. By the way, none of them admitted their guilt. Well, of course, they say they were provoked. They were released on bail, and the prosecutor's office is already preparing charges against 2 more participants in this incident. There's a separate story. Yes, I already mentioned that there was a cop there who was at the wedding, and it seems he has already been dismissed from the force. But that's not the end of the story, friends. A patrol arrived and tried to detain this aggressive guy who was the uninvited guest, but he put up wild resistance. Maybe he was under the influence of something. I wouldn't be surprised. Because when 6 people are beating you up, then the police arrive and start beating you up too, and you act like nothing's happening. You have to wonder, what's up with you, man? What are you made of? Who are you, warrior? In the process, well, they finally managed to restrain him, but this guy's heart stopped. The officers revived him, but at the hospital, the man still passed away a few hours later.
So I think I'm not far from the truth when I say there were probably some psychoactive drugs involved.
Investigators are waiting for the forensic expert's report to determine the exact cause of death, and at the same time, they're checking the officers themselves to see if their actions during the forcible arrest were lawful. In short, all the cameras and phones have been confiscated, and the investigation is ongoing. Well, friends, if you put all these stories together, you get a rather unpleasant, tragic picture. There isn't just one reason here. No single universal villain, no magical explanation after which you can say, well, now everything is clear. In one case, people overestimate their abilities in the water. Someone deliberately went into the storm. Who else? We already see a monstrous repetition of the tragedy that happened, and then crimes that remained unanswered for decades. And then some petty dispute escalates into a fight and ends with someone's death and a criminal case. And this, perhaps, is probably the most unpleasant part of this whole story, right? Catastrophes don't always start with something grand. Very often it all comes down to one small decision. Oh, it's fine, nothing will happen, I'll go for a swim. I'll just be a minute, I know how to swim. Yeah. I'll carefully back up. What could they do to me? Well, figure it out. And then it turns out that physics has no sense of humor. Water has no compassion. A car can't tell a child from a fence. And an agitated crowd is generally extremely bad at resolving conflicts. That's exactly why all these statistics are not there, so we can just be horrified by the numbers. But for a simple reason. So that next time a person stops a few seconds earlier,
Doesn't go into the water during a storm.
doesn't get behind the wheel when his mind isn't as sharp as usual.
Check where your kids are. Didn't get into a fight just to prove you're right to everyone around you.
Because later you can spend as much time as you want looking for who's to blame, waiting for expert opinions, conducting investigations, digging up old cases, and figuring out who exactly took the last step toward disaster. But there are decisions after which nothing can be fixed anymore. And that's actually enough to at least sometimes use your head in advance instead of trying to figure everything out after the fact. That wasn't my thoughts, friends. Thank you very much for your attention. Now, moving on to shoutouts. Let me know what you think.
So, a big hello to the working class. I was asked to send greetings to operator Żurawiu Wezawego.
Hello to you. To tire fitters. Tire fitters, hello. And to the mortarmen of the AFU, special respect, hello. And thanks to you for everything. So, friends, leave likes, write comments, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. That's all for now, but I just want to remind you that TransferGo is the best service for money transfers. The link is in the description. If you need to support your family and loved ones, follow the link, register, and send money during these difficult times. So I apologize for my French slips and stumbles. It's already been 15 minutes. Well,
That's all for now. See you next time.